I am confident that we are not strangers to our gospel lesson for today. We know this story that Jesus told by many names. Perhaps the most familiar is the parable of the prodigal son. Sometimes I prefer the parable of the lost boys, or even better, the parable of the loving father. And yes, those of you who have been around Immanuel for a while, you know that this is the parable that I keep coming back to again and again, searching for the truths about God and ourselves that I believe Jesus has hidden in this story like none other. I invite you to return to this story again this morning, because recently I encountered something about this lost story of these lost boys and a loving father that had previously escaped me completely. And when I realized it was one of those moments that goes like this: how did I never see that? Sometimes, to really get this story, you have to stand back and look at all three of these stories that Jesus tells in chapter 15. They follow a specific order. There's a story of a shepherd with a lost sheep, a widow with a lost coin, and a father with two lost boys. We most all of us can recall the details of these stories, but sometimes we miss what inspired these stories. So for the context, I would invite you to open your Bibles or one from the pew rack in front of you to Luke's Gospel, chapter 15. And look at the very beginning, verses 1 and 2. Luke 15, verses 1 and 2. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners, and he eats with them." As you also know, this is the favorite criticism of Jesus by all the church folks and all the Bible college professors of the first century. They criticize Jesus because he associated with the wrong crowd. In fact, he did more than just associate and socialize with them. He shared table with them, which means he sat down and ate with them. Now, if somewhere along the line you have missed the significance of this, I want to remind you that eating with someone in the first century was an expression of friendship and acceptance. Jesus was eating with tax collectors and sinners. A sign of friendship, a sign of acceptance. That's why today we say Jesus is a friend of sinners. And if you look through your hymn book, you will find many, many hymns that describe Jesus as such a friend. He is a friend because he eats with them. He accepts their invitations to go to their houses and eat. And he invites them at times to share a meal with him. Now, in these three stories, someone has lost something. A shepherd loses a sheep. A widow loses a coin. A father loses two boys. Interestingly, how this father loses two boys. One runs away to a far country, away from his father. The other stays at home with his father, but he is resentful. A common theme through these three stories is that something lost is found. And indeed, a shepherd may go looking for a lost lamb until he finds it. A widow may turn her house upside down until she discovers the lost coin. But as I said earlier, a father cannot go looking for lost boys. He has to wait for them to come home. You just can't make lost boys come home no matter how much you love them. No matter how intently you peer across the horizon, hoping to catch a glimpse of that boy coming home. No matter how many times you lift up your gaze and look across the table at the sullen face of that boy who is filled with resentfulness and anger, you can't make him come home until he is ready. There's another common theme of these three stories. And shamefully, I have failed for too long to grasp its significance. Yes, there are three lost things that are found, and then there are three celebrations. The shepherd calls to his friends and neighbors, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." The widow calls out to her friends and neighbors, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost." And finally, the father says to his servants, "Go get the fatted calf and kill it. Let's eat, let's celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, but he is alive again. He was lost, but now he is found." And the father says to his angry son, "But son, we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead, but now he's alive. He was lost and has been found." This morning, I want you to please pay particular notice to what they say. "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep. Rejoice with me, for I have found my coin. Rejoice, let's eat and celebrate, for my boy is home safe and sound." Listen, we had to celebrate, for your brother has finally come home. Notice no one says, "That lost lamb has been found. That lost coin has appeared. That lost boy has come home." No. Being lost does not change the status of the one who is lost. Relationships may be shattered and broken, but nothing can sever that connectedness. And so in our story they say, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my lamb. Rejoice with me, for I have found my coin. Rejoice with me, for my son has come home safe and sound. Come into the party, son, for your brother is home." Celebration is required for that which belongs to us, and that which belongs to us has been found. Now, sheep may wander off, coins get lost, but sons and daughters are a different matter altogether. Now, we have no idea from the story why this youngest boy demanded his inheritance. We don't know why he packed up his stuff, rode off into the sunset to a far country. But we do know, at least we think he knows, that in that far country he lived it up with wine and women and song. That is, if we take his brother's word for it, who must have sent a private eye to the far country to document all of his brother's sins, to document all the ways his brother discovered riotous living. And I bet that this big brother knows his little brother spent all his money on prostitutes. I'm confident that this big brother also knows that his little brother is destitute, alone, starving, and trying to survive in a far country feeding pigs. And somehow I can hear what this big brother is saying about his little brother to all of his friends. And I'm not proud at all that I know what he's saying. But I bet he's saying stuff just like this. He made his bed. Now let him lie in it. I knew he would blow all of Daddy's money. Yep, it burned a hole right through his pocket. He's always been so irresponsible. He sowed his wild oats. Now it's time for him to harvest the consequences. Yep, he's out there throwing his life away, and he won't listen to anybody. Yeah, it's sad. He's such a disappointment to Daddy. Well, you know, stupid is as stupid does. Big brother, on the one hand, filled with judgment and condemnation. On the other hand, filled with envy and jealousy, anger and hostility toward his own brother and his own father. Let's not make this little brother more than he is. There's only one reason he's going home. He's hungry. He's desperate. He's run out of options. And when you're hungry and desperate and you've run out of options, mysteriously you come to your senses. You wake up. And you remember the Father's house. And this boy doesn't remember the Father's house and how well he had it when he lived at home. No, he's dreaming about how good the hired hands have it. And when he looks at his own situation, those hired hands are living like kings. So he heads home with a line he hopes will soften the old man up. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So if you can find it in your heart, just treat me like a hired hand. Well, to his surprise and ours, the father will have none of that. He runs to his boy, throws his arms around him, kisses him with tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. That boy might be dirty. He might smell like pigs. He might be nothing but a bag of skin and bones. But that's his boy. That's his beloved boy. And look at him. He needs a new robe. He needs sandals on his feet. He needs a ring for his finger. And there has to be rejoicing and a party for my boy's home safe and sound. Now you see, this is what I've missed all these years. These three stories are really about coming home. They're about going off on your own and getting lost. It's a universal story. We all have one. In some way, we have all been the prodigal son, and we've all been that angry and bitter older brother. In our own way, we've gone off into the far country trying to forget who we were, believing that somehow in this new land we would discover who we truly are. And when we became desperate, like this little boy, we turned toward home too. We headed home with guilt like mud caked on our shoes. We headed home wearing shame like a hair coat. Somehow we know if we are going to survive, we know if there's any chance we're going to make it, we've got to get home. Really, we have no choice but to go home. But our greatest fear, our absolute greatest fear is that when we get home, no one will care. No one will care. You see, this is why the father had to throw the party. It's for the boy. It's all about the boy. It's all about trying to tell that boy that he is loved, and absolutely nothing has changed the love in a father's heart. It's to tell all the friends, all the neighbors that the boy, my boy, has come home. And Daddy could care less where that boy has been because he's home, and that's all that matters. He's home, safe and sound from that far country where he was lost. You know, sometimes late at night, lying in my bed, I feared that boy was dead. So there is absolutely nothing you can do to stymie my joy. For my boy is home, he's alive. Now, make no mistake about it. This is not a father who says, "Boy, I wonder when you'd get home. I wondered when you'd finally wake up and come to your senses and remember how well you had it here." No, this is a father who throws a lavish celebration. Kill the fatted calf. That was the calf held in the stall, waiting for some significant guest to arrive. A new robe, a new sandals, a new ring for his finger. My boy is coming to his senses. I have to seize the moment. I have to remind him who he really is. He's not the failure he thinks he is. I have to assure him that my love flows from my heart into his. Coming home has to be a big deal, a big, big deal, or he'll miss what I'm trying to say. Now, as I listen to this story that Jesus tells today, I become more and more convinced that the homecoming party is what these stories are all about. The shepherd says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lamb." The widow says, "Rejoice with me, I found my coin." The father says, "Rejoice with me, my son has come home." Your brother's home, safe and sound. It's about homecoming. It's about throwing a party for the one that was lost who makes their way home. But this is what it's not about. It's not about reconciliation. It's not about how all this lostness gets made straight overnight. Do you notice there's not a word in this story that Jesus tells about how this father and this youngest son were able to mend their relationship? If you listen to the story, we never know if the older brother ever forgave his little brother, accepted him. We don't know if the older brother ever made peace with his daddy. There's so much about this story we don't know. But what we do know is when lost things are found, you throw a party. The only ending to this story is a homecoming celebration. The one we believed was dead is alive. The one that was lost is found. We have to celebrate. We have to rejoice and to celebrate. And this is where I've missed the story. And perhaps you have too. When we come home as the lost child, when we welcome home a lost brother or sister, we don't have to worry about the future. We don't have to ponder how things are going to get straightened out, how wounds are healed, and how people forgive. We just have to get ready for the homecoming party. The chips and the dips and the punch and the invitations and the streamers and the fireworks. We get ready for the party. For Dad's son or Dad's daughter is home. Our brother or sister is finally safe and sound back in the house. That's the only reason we rejoice. That's the reason Daddy's heart is bursting with joy, and that's the reason we start putting on our dancing shoes. Because our brother, our sister is home, safe and sound. I want you to know this morning how I was introduced to this side of the story that Jesus told. A young woman by the name of Anika opened my eyes. She is a graduate and resident of Thistle Farms in Nashville. Thistle Farms takes men and women off the streets of Nashville that are caught up in sexual trafficking. When they come to their senses, Thistle Farms welcomes them home, gives them a key to the house, a basket with clean sheets, fresh towels, underclothing that is clean, and welcomes daughter or son home. And then for 2 years, they walk alongside of them until slowly, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, Jesus, through His healing love, makes them new and joyful and hopeful people. They become a new people, a new person. Anika was a new person. Her story is universal. It is unique to her, but she's very much aware that I have my story and you have your story. And her declaration to us is that Jesus' love heals. A couple of weeks ago, I accompanied a group of women from here down to Thistle Farms. We arrived in time for their morning devotions. We sat in a circle with them. Anika lit a candle in the center of us. We had our devotional time and our prayer. And as we finished, Anika picked up the candle to extinguish it, and she said something like this: "Our candle burns because we have lost brothers and sisters out there trying to find their way home." I just can't get over the way she worked that phrase. We have lost brothers and sisters out there trying to find their way home. And over again, Anika kept saying about Thistle Farms, we are a non-judgmental community. We don't judge anybody when they come in this door because they all have their story, and it's a universal story. We've all been lost, and we all make our way home. I wonder if this is not maybe what Jesus is trying to say to us. here in His house. This is not a place for self-righteous Pharisees judging and condemning, nor is it a place for Bible college professors keeping track of theology. I think maybe that's why He intentionally eats with tax collectors and sinners, because He knows that just one day one of them might come to their senses and come home. And then He's got to throw a party. And more than anything, Jesus wants to know the name of the person for whom He's throwing this homecoming party. So He is non-judgmental, eating with tax collectors and sinners. As I was trying to get to the end of this sermon, I was reading a book I bought several years ago about Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell, early on in the 20th century, began to study the different religions of the world and began to compare them. He became the foremost expert in mythology in the world. Several years ago, you may have seen him with Bill Moyers on a show entitled The Power of Myth on public television. It's one of the most insightful conversations I've ever listened to. Well, Joseph Campbell grew up in the Catholic tradition of the church, and over the years, he wandered off into a far country, and Joseph got lost. And near the end of his life, he is dying, and he's taken to a Catholic hospital. And as you know, in most Catholic hospitals, in every room, there's a crucifix hanging on the wall. It is there to comfort those who are suffering with the sufferings of Christ present before them. But in Joseph Campbell's room, the Christ on the crucifix was not nailed to the tree, but His arms were outstretched. And Joseph said, Jesus is welcoming me home. And near his last hours in that room, a lost boy came home, and I would say there was joy in heaven among all who were there. After 9/11 and those events that scared us so deeply, and the fear that began to permeate our society, as a congregation of people, we began to burn the Christ candle every Sunday to remind us that Jesus Christ is with us and we need not be afraid. It's a symbol to remind us that He is above us and beneath us and around us and within us. But if you will, from now on, we will print in our order of service these words about this candle. The Christ candle burns each Sunday during our services of worship. The burning candle reminds us of God's presence with us and shines out into the darkness to light the way of our sisters and brothers trying to find their way home. Please, somebody bring the cake and the ice cream and the banners. Let's never miss the joy when a brother or sister comes home. Amen. To respond to this story today, we're going to sing a hymn that may be one of the most familiar hymns of invitation or contemplation ever sung by Baptists and Methodists, and maybe Presbyterians on occasion. It is just as I am. We will sing verses 1, 3, 5, and 6. And as we sing, if there's anyone here on the way home, we're here to welcome you with joy. And if you know you've made your way home, remember the journey that you had to take. And I pray to God that somebody welcomed you home with joy. If they didn't throw a party for you then, come and we'll throw a party for you.